Are Bani Israel and Jews the same? The question is whether Bani Israel, children of Israel, and Jews are the same people. To answer this, we must look at the Qur'an and history. Research shows that Bani Israel were the descendants of Prophet Yaqub. Israel was another name for Prophet Yaqub. In the Qur'an, wherever the sons of Yaqub are mentioned, they are called Bani Israel. The title Bani Israel refers to the descendants of Yaqub, while the term, those who became Jews, al-Ladina Hadu in the Qur'an refers to people who adopted Judaism later. This shows that the original followers of Prophet Musa were not called Jews. The term appeared much later. During the time of Prophet Muhammad, the Jews living in Medina were actually followers of Judaism as a religion, not necessarily the biological descendants of the ancient Bani Israel. They were enemies of Islam, constantly plotting against the Prophet and Muslims. The Qur'an, Surah Ali Imran, says, "Indeed, Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian, but he was one inclining toward truth, a Muslim, and he was not of the polytheists." If Prophet Ibrahim was a Muslim, then how could his descendants be Jews or Christians? This means that the true prophets were all Muslims. They were not followers of Judaism or Christianity. When the Qur'an mentions those who became Jews, al-Ladina Hadu, it means those who turned into Jews later on, not the original Israelites. Thus, there is a difference between Bani Israel and Jews. History also proves that not all Jews were Israelites. Most of the people who later became Jews were not originally from Bani Israel. They accepted Judaism later. The Jewish religion was founded centuries after Prophet Musa. The word Jew itself is derived from Yehuda, one of the sons of Yaqub. So, Jew is a religious term rather than an ethnic one. Historical and linguistic research shows that the word Jew was used differently in different periods of time. There was also a nation that identified as Jews in various regions. From Prophet Adam to Prophet Yaqub, all prophets were servants of Allah, and they all preached submission to Him, Islam. According to the Qur'an, Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah sent messengers to all nations. Among them were people who later became known as Jews, Christians, and others. However, the earlier scriptures were altered, which is why the Qur'an is now the final and preserved revelation. The Qur'an confirms the existence of Jews and Israelites in historical context, but refutes their claim of being God's chosen people. The Qur'an declares that Allah's guidance and mercy are not limited to any one nation. They are for all humanity. It also repeatedly mentions Bani Israel and their history, how they disobeyed the commandments of Allah and were punished for their arrogance. Surah Al-Baqarah, starting from verse 40, describes their story in detail. Allah reminds them of His favors and how they turned away despite receiving guidance. In Surah Al-Baqarah, the Qur'an tells the story of how Satan deceived Prophet Adam and his wife. After that, Allah said, "Descend from paradise, all of you. When guidance comes to you from me, whoever follows my guidance shall have no fear, nor shall they grieve." Later, Allah mentions Prophet Yaqub and his descendants, Bani Israel, in these words, "O children of Israel, remember my favor which I bestowed upon you, and fulfill my covenant. I will fulfill your covenant, and fear only me." On Surah Al-Baqarah. This verse reminds them that Allah had greatly favored them, and that they were expected to keep their promises to Him. But when they broke their covenants and turned away, they faced humiliation and divine punishment. Allah had once given them honor and blessings above other nations. But when they rejected the truth, they lost their status. The Qur'an keeps reminding them that those who break Allah's commands and covenant will face disgrace. After these divine verses, Allah described the events that took place among the descendants of Prophet Yaqub, their trials, their disobedience, and their repeated rebellion. In these scriptures there is also mention of their hidden conspiracies and opposition toward the message of Islam. Historically, the Israelites existed long before Prophet Jacob's time became widely known. They were known as the descendants of Jacob, and there were centuries of difference between their earliest ancestors and the time of Prophet Moses. Even before Moses, their traditions and beliefs were already established. Prophet Moses himself mentioned this, that long before his arrival, their nation had already taken form. During the reign of Prophet Solomon, their kingdom reached great heights. It was a time of wealth, wisdom, and prosperity, the golden era of their history. But after Solomon's death, his vast empire began to crumble. His descendants divided the kingdom into two parts. One was called Judah and the other Samaria. The descendants of Judah ruled over the kingdom of Judah, while the rest governed the Samaritan lands. For some time, both kingdoms existed side by side, but soon another powerful nation called Israel arose and captured the land of Samaria. From that point onward, the Jewish people were recognized as the descendants of these ancient kingdoms. Later, another branch of Jacob's family emerged, the descendants of Benjamin, who was the real brother of Prophet Joseph. As time passed, the tribe of Judah gained power, while the rest of the Israelites lost their influence. To distinguish themselves, they began to call themselves Jews. Centuries later, their religious scholars and elders organized their faith and traditions into a structured religion. They named it Judaism, the faith of the Jews. And from that time onward, Judaism became the recognized name of their religion, a system that shaped their beliefs, worship, and way of life. Around 4 centuries before the birth of Christ, this tribe was established in Arabia, and it continued to grow until the 5th century. When Prophet Jesus appeared, these people already existed and were known as the Jews at that time. Another narration tells us that the people called Jews were actually the descendants of Khazar, the grandson of Prophet Noah. Prophet Noah had 2 sons, Ham and Japheth, who lived in the northern regions. Japheth's son Khazar became the ancestor of this tribe. They settled not in Kiltim, but in the Caucasus region, making it their homeland. The kings of this tribe were known by the royal title Tsar or Czar, and their kingdoms were considered royal states. This Khazarian nation lived among the mountains and valleys of what is now Russia and the Caucasus region. When the Jews and Assyrians, from the land of Canaan and Chaldea, migrated westward toward Europe, the Khazars moved with them. It is a misconception that these people were true descendants of the ancient Hebrews. They adopted the Jewish name, but they had no blood relation to Prophet Abraham. The Khazars embraced Judaism and began following the teachings of the Torah. They also learned the Hebrew language brought from Egypt and tried to pronounce it correctly in their own dialect. They combined elements of Hebrew, Arabic, and their native tongues into their own written script. The Jews living in Israel, Germany, Poland, and Australia today are not the descendants of the original Israelites, but rather of the Khazars. The Khazars were cousins of the Edomites, the descendants of Esau. One of their kings, named Bulan, accepted Judaism around 740 and even declared it the official religion of his state. From that time onward, the Khazars became known as Jews. Later, their descendants spread across 2 main regions. One group moved eastward toward the lands of Arabia, while the other migrated westward into Europe. That is why the majority of today's Jews, especially those living in Poland, belong to the Khazarian lineage. Despite many hardships and challenges, they managed to prosper and establish themselves successfully in those regions. Research has proven that the so-called Jews are not actually descendants of the Israelites. In 1981, the famous American economist Professor Arthur Koestler wrote that these Jews are not of American or Semitic origin, but are in fact descendants of Eastern and other Asian peoples. He presented this theory in his famous book, The 13th Tribe. This book contains 255 pages, and in it he wrote that the Jews of Eastern Europe and America are actually descendants of the Khazar tribe. This theory later became widely known through various media and educational institutions. After the Second World War, the founder of New Zealand University, Henry Ford, established a commission to investigate American Jews. The commission reported that the Jews actually originated from the Khazar nation. As a result of this research, the findings were published in 1923 under the title, The International Jew. These findings proved to be very influential. In his prophetic views, Henry Ford also wrote that the Jews existing in the world today are actually descendants of the Khazar tribe. He proved that these people are not Americans, but of Asian origin. He further said that this nation seeks to dominate the world financially and politically and has already gained control over the economic and political systems of the United States. Research also shows that most of the present-day Jews are descendants of the Khazar nation, who are known as Bukhari, Eastern, or Ashkenazi Jews. The Sephardic Jews make up only 5%, with a total population of around 40,000. The Jews of Spain, Turkey, and Western Europe are Sephardic, while the Ashkenazi Jews of Eastern Europe are descendants of the Khazar Jews who came from southern Russia.